Our topic for today, as you can see, is shadow work and the curriculum of the Atonement. You know, one of the things that we're all always doing is we're always thinking. There's never a time, actually, that we're not doing that. We want to be able to get to a place in meditation where we're not being crazy, where we can get to a kind of quiet mind or empty mind, which is not obsessed with the world, but we're always thinking, right? And one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to work things out. I mean, obviously, we're trying to work things out. We're working out relationships. We're working out relationships with these bodies of ours, with our financial situations, with our immediate relationships and beyond our immediate relationships to everybody that we encounter. And we want to get to a really healthy place with that. We want to get to a place where there's nothing but peace in our minds. That's why the foundation, actually it was originally called the Parasensory Foundation. Some of you may not know about that, which was started by Judy Scutch Whitson here in New York City. And Judy was into investigating everything that was sort of exciting and new in the parapsychological field. And Judy and I both met Helen about the same time. I was just about 6 weeks before I met Helen that Judy did. And one of the first things that Judy did when she met Helen, Judy, keep in mind, was pretty psychically oriented. And she said, "You've written a book," right? And Helen, "Yeah, how did you know that?" Right? So she intuited that Helen had been doing this work. And then once Judy got it, and Judy and I were friends since the 60s, she got very excited about the course. Judy did. And I already had a copy of the psychotherapy pamphlet from the course that I'd been studying. And partly it was Judy's enthusiasm that got me to take this even more seriously. But then they dissolved the Parasensory Foundation. They set up the Foundation for Inner Peace. Because what are we after here if it's not inner peace? I mean, if you got inner peace, you got it. If the mind is all disquieted and distracted and occupied or preoccupied, I heard somebody make an announcement on television recently about somebody that we all know that I won't mention who has been arrested and is in jail. And they were talking about how this fellow was deeply depressed. And that's the state that he's living in now, right? Deeply depressed because of the circumstances, the story, the background, right? Well, we don't want to go there, or even worried or anxious, right? And the Course can help us out of that by helping us to do exactly what Asuko was talking about, which is to remember. To remember who we really are. So that's what I want to focus on today. I want to talk about remembering who we are in truth and not within the context of an illusion. Because the Course in Miracles says, you know, we really live within an illusory world. And we call it the world of the ego. We'll talk about that more as time goes on. Orientation-wise, by the way, we're going to take a break in about an hour, and then we come back after 15 minutes. I didn't say that earlier. So, I said that the topic was atonement and shadow work. But before that, anybody start the Course in Miracles January 1st again during the workbook lessons? I got 1. I got 2, 3, 4, 5. They're here. 6, 7. Got 8 anywhere? I got at least 7 of you. Oh, we got 8. All right. Have started doing it again. Now, you don't have to do it a second time or a third time through if you've done it and you feel comfortable with the fact that you've done it. but I've done it several times. And I find that every time I do, it just goes deeper and it gets clearer and I understand more. And I don't even want to begin the day without doing it. That's fix a cup of tea, number one. Number two, look at the lesson for today and see what it is. And there's some very powerful stuff in there. So I started on January 1st with number one, and today would be number 13. And what I think I'm going to be doing as I continue to do these classes is I'm going to look at a little bit of what's, each month I'll kind of look at what's been coming up, what we've been looking at. So the course begins in a way in which it begins kind of hard. By kind of hard, I mean it's a little difficult. Nothing I see means anything. What do you mean nothing I see means anything? You know, that kind of stuff, right? So it's a retraining of the mind. So let me start our slides here. So this is a course in mind training. And the Course in Miracles says it's a course in mind training because you have been very poorly taught. And we've been very poorly taught by the world, by society, by our parents. Now, they didn't mean to do anything mean. It wasn't like that. They were poorly taught, and their parents were poorly taught, and we just keep passing it on down through the ages. But then we also recognize that when things aren't working, there's time for a change. We really need to see things differently, and the Course is about really seeing completely differently, because it's about seeing without the context of the ego. We're going to talk more about what the ego is a little bit later on. So these are some lines that I just came across this week. I'm going to talk about, just give you some ideas to start. Number one, everything's an idea, period. Don't you just like these little short bang? Is anybody who thinks that everything isn't an idea? Okay, we agree. Everything is idea. Number two, there's nothing outside of you. Well, that's 5 words, right? What does it mean when it says there's nothing outside of you? Anybody want to answer that question for me? What does it mean when it says there's nothing outside? There's nothing outside of the way you see things. You are the projector of the world that you would see. You are the determiner of the world that you see. And there's 2 ways, there's really just 2 ways that you can see the world. You can be damning it or you can be blessing it. I mean, to put it in a very simple way, you can be loving it or you can be hating it, to put it in another very, very simple context. So there's nothing outside of you because everything is a matter of what's going on here. We really need to look at what's going on within the mind in order for us to begin to change the mind about the way we see. So the mind, definition of the mind from the Course, it says mind is the activating, whoops, here we go, I'm right in the right place. Mind is the activating or energizing agent of spirit. Okay? This is the thing that gets, and then the thing, many times I think we can kind of use the word mind and spirit interchangeably as that which is not of the ego. All right, so spirit is immortal and immortality is a constant state. This is good news. I'm assuming that you all know this. That's really why you're here. This is what all the religions of the world have been saying since forever. And if you think that the life and the world is just about what's going on outside there in the world, politics and things like that, you know that that's pretty crazy. Or it can be pretty crazy. It has been very crazy in the course of history. Right? So, and just as a reference, when the Course uses the small m mind, it refers to the ego or the agent of choice in the world, and capital M mind always refers to God. Now let's go on. So there's something we could call the whole mind, right? Or the universal mind, right? And we're a part of that mind. You can't help but be a part of it. So only one mindedness exists without confusion. So there's another part of us that that is confused. So that little part we call the ego, we're going to examine that more in a moment. That is very confused. It's very anxious. It has a tendency to get upset, but we also tend to believe that's who we are. And that's not who you are, even for us. There's no ego in heaven, would be another way to say that. You couldn't possibly have an ego in heaven because of the way the ego works. First of all, the ego wants to be in charge, and it wants to run things. And the whole mind does run things, but as we are part of the whole mind, it's in that sense that we are connected to running the whole show. So the ego, I kind of like this. I created this slide with this thought in mind. Ego exists in a kind of a dark corner of its own making. What the ego is actually something which is very lonely. It's very isolated. It's very broken off. Its interest, the course is that divine abstraction, another name for God, takes joy in sharing. And it's really as we're sharing our minds that we have our greatest joy. What do you want to do when you want to get together with friends? You want to connect, right? Well, there's a way of connecting that's not just with friends, but it's connecting with the Holy Spirit. And this is something that, of course, is very, very clear about, right? There's only these two minds. One of the minds, this little ego, this dot thing here in the corner, actually doesn't even exist, but we think it exists. And then there's another mind, which is really controlling everything, which we call the Holy Spirit, which is also who you are as spirit. If you're part of spirit, then you're a part of that mind. And when that mind is integrated with your mind, then things work fine. Jesus in the Gospels says, I and the Father are one. And not only I and the Father are one, right, but he says, the words I speak come from the Father. It is not I who speak, but the Father who speaks through me. So we actually want to get to a point where whatever we say is not coming from an ego, but it's coming from this one mind, this one universe, which is always loving, it's always gentle, it's always kind. People will say, well, how do you know when you're in your right mind? Well, first of all, I would say, how do you know when you're not in your right mind? And it's pretty easy to know when you're not in your right mind because it's crazy, it's attacking, it's angry, it's frustrated, it's anytime, all of those adjectives that we could use that would be similar to that are describing something that you're not. And because it's something that you're not, there's where the depression comes in. There's where the anxiety comes in, because you know that that's true. You know it's not you, right? But you don't know the whole mind. I mean, the ego cannot know the whole mind. There's a line in the Course where it says the ego suspects. It suspects that there's something else, greater. And it's all actually worried about that something else because it's concerned that that something else may kill it. It's not going to kill it. It can't kill it. How can you kill something that doesn't exist? But what it can do is to obliterate it in the terms of the sense it's not something that's done cruelly or harshly. It's just when you wake up and you realize there was nothing there. There was nothing there to be upset about in the first place. So it's split off and confused thought of separation. Sometimes it thinks it's a victim of the world it sees. That's one of the lesson 31, which is coming up pretty quick in the course, end of the month, beginning of February. 31, I am not a victim of the world I see. That's I've often said that I think if you can get one of the lessons and really get one of the lessons, get this lesson. I am not a victim of the world I see. So anytime you think that you're being victimized, you just stop. And that's not to say people don't get victimized, right? But still, stop, look, think. Why am I entertaining this thought of victimhood? That's one possibility. Sometimes it thinks it's God. And that's the other extreme. It's in charge. It's running the world. You all know what I'm talking about? It's running everything, right? And that's just as insane as thinking I'm a victim of the world I see. All right, let's go on. So now I'm going to do some quotes from the Course. Because of your Father's love, you can never forget him. This is a really good point. There's always the memory. We're back to remembering and sharing. The memory of God is always there. It may be very buried. You may claim, well, I'm an atheist, and I don't believe in God. But there's more than one person that says there's no atheists in foxholes. And that's really, really true. If you get in trouble, and you're really in trouble, you're going to say, God help me. Yeah, and at that point, you believe in God. You believe that you need help, and you know that you can't do it by yourself. Let me start that over. Because of your Father's love, you can never forget him. For no one can forget what God himself placed in his memory. That's again why it's remembering and sharing. We're remembering this. The idea is not just to remember, but to bring this back into full consciousness. Where this is going to enlightenment. We're going to complete what the Course calls the atonement and get all the way back to God again. So there are no separated thoughts. There are no divided thoughts. There are nothing which is broken off. You can deny it, but you cannot lose it. A voice will answer every question you ask. That's anyway, there's a voice inside of the Holy Spirit is described in the Course in Miracles as the voice for God. And this voice is always there. The Course says it's never not there. Even while you sleep, it's there. And you continue to get direction, whether you're paying attention to the direction or not. And you may not be paying attention to the direction. A voice will answer every question you ask, and a vision will correct the perception of everything you see. You are waiting only for him, and you do not know it. His memory shines in your mind and cannot be obliterated. If some of you know Ph.D. de Chardin, by any chance, Al does, a couple of Eric, 2 or 3 others. I taught a course. It's sort of interesting. I did my master's thesis on the work of Ph.D. de Chardin. Let me just say a word about who Chardin was. He was a French Jesuit priest, a paleontologist, an anthropologist, and quite a number of other things who came up with these incredible ideas, all of which the Catholic Church squelched. They tried to get rid of him. They tried to quiet him. Now they forbid his books to be published, right? And they sent him off to Japan. They thought that would be a good place to hide him from the world. And he went to Japan. What happened was that he had a lot of free time in Japan to think and to write. So he did a lot of thinking and a lot of writing. And I have 2 quotes from him that I want to share here. By the way, his dates are 1887 to 1955. That's the same year that Einstein died. The course that I taught at the New School in 1973, I found a flyer from it in my drawer the other day, was called Young, Teilhard, and the Future of Consciousness from 1973. And by the way, he's buried near where I live. He's buried in you all know the CIA in Poughkeepsie, New York? The Culinary Institute of America. It used to be a Jesuit seminary. But there are fewer and fewer Jesuits, so the CIA bought the place out. And you can make a little pilgrimage to his grave if you would like to. It's the only grave in the whole cemetery that's got flowers on it, perennial flowers that come up. Somebody put them there, right? But he was quite a thinker. He came up with the idea of, or reinforced the idea of what's called the noosphere. The noosphere. The noosphere was his idea that there was kind of a, just as there's a biosphere and an atmosphere, there's a noosphere. That's a level of thinking which surrounds the planet, a level of thought, which of course is invisible, but that he's also thought that as there are more and more people on the planet, and there would be developing a kind of internet, or a kind of web of consciousness that he talked about. He died in 55. There's no internet. There's no web. A world. So he's talking about all these things. He's thinking of it on a psychic level, not on a physical level. We've actually got it down working on a physical level. But as that more and more connected, we would more and more actually begin to come together and realize the humanity that's there for all of us. But this is a good quote from God. Love alone is capable of united living beings in such a way as to complete and fulfill them, for it alone takes them and joins them by what is deepest in themselves. What is deepest in themselves, we're joined. We talk about love as something which joins us. That's true. But spirit is another way that we can talk about what joins us. And he says also, this is another quote from him at the very bottom, the whole of life lies in seeing. Now, I said that a moment ago, but let's talk about what seeing is. So it's, if the projection makes perception, so the ego's way of seeing, that's one way of seeing, but then there's a wholly another way of seeing, which is what we're really talking about here. That's why all these workbook lessons in the beginning are nothing I see means anything, etc. First, we got to dump everything before, and then as you get into the later parts of the course, like especially when you get up into the 200s, you're building back up again. This providing you the real way of seeing. So, in many, the course says, only the spark remains. Now, the course talks about what it calls the little spark. The little spark is this little point of memory that's there in the mind, which you can't forget it. In many, only the spark remains, for the great rays are obscured. The Course talks also about what it calls great rays. So think of the little spark as just kind of like a little pilot light, like a little point of energy. At one point, the Course talks about the little spark and the great rays. The great rays, think of the great rays as the sun, right? And think of yourself as being a sunbeam, literally. When you were a child in Sunday school, you say, I am a sunbeam. I don't really even remember that or not, but some of you might. So, but we're more than that. We are the sun itself when you see the whole thing. Yet God has kept the spark alive so that the rays can never be completely forgotten. That's like saying, so that God can never be completely forgotten. You but see the little spark, if you but see the little spark, you will learn of the greater light. First, we got to become aware of the spark. For the rays are there unseen, perceiving the spark will heal, but knowing the spark will create. Well, I'm sorry. Perceiving the spark will heal, but knowing the light will create. Right? So the Course talks a lot about what it calls creation, but it doesn't really say this is, we create, in heaven we create, and it doesn't really explain what creation is. We understand it's not the same as creation here, but I think if you substitute the word love for create, it kind of makes a good bit of sense. So let me go on. Just a second. You cannot. Okay. You're good.
It's on? It's on?
Yeah. You're
Okay,
on.
so I just really briefly was going to say that around 1970, Creedence Clearwater Revival had a great song that meant so much to me called Long as I Can See the Light. And it
Mm.
seemed like, wow, you know, like I could really see just this little flicker of a candle way down this long, dark tunnel. I mean, it was a very dark time
It's a
for me.
great, yeah.
And then also one other thing, Paul Cézanne said, talked about a thread and trying to hold on to the thread. You know, he's talking about his ability to focus in reality in his painting.
That's a great way to think of it.
Mm-hmm.
So just this little light, this little spark, it's always there. And given the right conditions, that could come back into full flame again, and that could become bright again. It could shine forth from you again. Len, you got to have the mic. You got the mic over here? All right.
Well, I picture everyone having the spark, and the way to get the light is everyone connecting with everyone else's spark, and
That's
then the
right.
light gets
Right.
brighter.
It does get brighter, right. Okay, let's go on and read this. Yet in the returning, the little light must be acknowledged first. So we just start off by acknowledging this little, that it is there, right? And it's in everyone. And don't think that there's anyone that it's not in, right? We can probably also see it, for example, in our dogs and cats and anything that's alive, actually, and that's got life in it, that we share that life with. Right? But the separation was a descent from magnitude to littleness. So you all know that in terms of the Course, the way this whole thing this whole world, these bodies, everything which is external, gets created. It gets created because of the idea of separation, the idea that we could break off from the whole. It's impossible to break off from the whole. The thinking that we can break off from the whole is the thing which has created this whole world and every aspect of it. But the spark is still as pure as the greater light. It's still the same energy because it is the remaining call of creation. Put all your faith in it, and God Himself will answer you. So, another point the Course talks about, this really requires complete dedication and complete commitment. You can't just give a little part. We're all headed home, meaning we're all headed to eternity. We're all heading back to reality, back to truth. But sometimes it's like you want to hold on to a little something. You want to take something with you. But there's nothing you can take with you except to let go of everything that's not true, which is what we're going to do today. And I thought maybe for a moment we'd talk a little bit about what the ego is. So the ego is a belief or a false concept we hold about ourselves, but underline the word belief. Beliefs aren't real. It is a dream about who we think we are. It's a dream. It is a thought we try to think apart from God. We can't think apart from you. Actually, literally can. Everything that is a thought that is not a part of God is dreaming. And for the fact that it's dreaming means it's not really real. Right? It is an error, a misperception, a fantasy, which has nothing to do with reality. It is the part that likes being separate. At least it thinks it likes being separate. We don't really like being separate, but we think that we like being separate. It's that which makes up the world. It's that which interprets, projects, judges, analyzes. The ego is nothing. It is a dream. It is just an idea, and nothing more than that. And it's an idea that doesn't last. In reality, there's no ego. In heaven, there is no ego. At best, it is a tool we can use to help us in awakening. The ego is a will in opposition to the will of God. Something I think I'd like to do next time is to talk about will, and two kinds of will: the will, God's will, and then also this thing we call willpower, and how the Course talks about this thing called a little willingness, and how we need a little willingness to join with a greater willingness in order to be fulfilled. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that it's interesting. The ego could be used as a tool.
Yes.
That's what I do. When I recognize the ego, I use it to get strong. My other
Right.
part to get stronger.
That's what you want to do.
Yeah,
You
so
want to be able to see it, and then once you see it, you can use it, like you're saying. Now, I know that many of you, Helen here, I know, and others studied with Ken Wapnick. Anybody else in the room spend time? Did. Anyhow, Ken came up with a chart, and this is a piece of his chart. It's not the whole thing. I tried to draw this myself on the computer, and I lacked the ability to go as far as I would like to have gone with it. Maybe I can hand out samples of his chart at another time. Pardon? You sent it to me. Oh, I know I've got one. All right, so I will be using it. So let's just look at what we got here. Today, we want to, in part, be focusing on this thing called the decision maker. So we got this line, and above the line, what we got is we got home. I wish I had my friend Donna Carey here. Donna Carey got this wonderful, it's my favorite song that she wrote, called Remember Home. Remember Home. It's just got the most wonderful melody to it. Right? And there's a memory, talking about memory again, there's a memory in us of home. Everybody wants to go home. Right? Where does Dorothy want to go in The Wizard of Oz? Home. You can just keep running down the list. Alice in Wonderland wants to go home. We all want to go home. A lot of people, when they're dying, we've talked about this in the past, will start saying, I want to go home. Right? Meaning that they know that there's a home, and that this is not home. Right? And this is the same. This is where mind is. This is where oneness is. This is where God is. This is where Christ is. This is love or truth or reality. Those words are synonyms. They all just kind of mean the same thing. Actually, the more we get into this, the less need we have for words. The less because words in and of themselves are separations, by definition, because they're trying to define something, right? We transcend language. We transcend language when we get to love, because you can't really say what love is. You can know it. We can know what God is, but we can't say what God is. Just the same way you can't say what love is, right? The main point is that there is this thing we call the decision maker. Or another term that we could use besides decision maker, and I think this is what you're referring to when you talk about looking at the ego, is this observer. So you see yourself being crazy, you see yourself getting angry, you see yourself getting upset, you see yourself being insane. What you want to do is to stop as quickly as you possibly can and look at this thing and think, where does this come from? What is this? Do I need this? Insanity? No, I don't need it. Some people will get into feeding it. Now, if you get into feeding it, you really got a problem. I remember a couple of years ago, I was talking to a quote colleague on the phone who was trying to get me into an argument. And he knew he was trying to get me into an argument. And I just kept saying to him, I'm not going to argue with you. I am sorry, I am not. I just kept saying, I'm not going to argue with you about this, right? You can tell me all about your position that you want to, but this is not, because that's what the egos like to argue. The ego likes to see a problem. There is no problem unless you perceive the problem. If you perceive a problem, then you've got a problem. Right? But without that, there's no problem. Right? So obviously, again, this is the two choices that we have. The ego, the Course refers to as a wrong mind or insanity. The Holy Spirit we refer to as right mind or sanity. On the one hand, the ego is a tiny, these are just synonyms for it, a tiny mad idea, a dream of separation, individuality, separateness. The error is real. We really have broken off from God. We really have left home. It's a place. So this is a further rendition of what right-minded and wrong-minded is. So we're trying to get out of the wrong mind and into the right mind. So let's look. The right mind is the part of our separated minds that contains the Holy Spirit, part of what you're just saying, the voice of forgiveness and reason. On the other hand, the wrong mind is the part of the separated and split mind that contains the ego, the voice of sin, guilt, fear, and attack. Back to the left-hand side, or the right-hand side, depending on where you're looking. We are repeatedly asking to choose it instead of wrong-mindedness, to follow the Holy Spirit's guidance rather than the ego's, and thus return to one-mindedness. The Course says, in every decision that you make, ask me first. Especially the tough. There was once, I remember I was really trying to decide about how to handle a difficulty with a brother. And I was at a point of not knowing and giving up. And I just said to the Holy Spirit, help. And I got an answer. It was a really interesting answer. The answer was just four words. Let me handle this. Let me handle this. And I thought, that's great, because I don't have a problem anymore. I thought I had a problem, but I can just turn it over. That's what the Course said. Just turn it over and let somebody else handle it. Now, I thought I'd mention also what I call the 3 U's. I'm sorry about that. I couldn't resist it. The 3 U's. Okay. There's 3 U's in the Course that the Course is talking about. You is the most frequently used pronoun in the Course. It appears 3,590 times. Sometimes the Course is referring to the you, as in the case of the ego, as in, you think you're the home of evil, darkness, and sin. Then there's the you that is this is the you that's the body personality. The ego thinks the body is the ego's chosen home. So on that level, we're very convinced that that's who we are. Right? Then there's the you that is the chooser, the observer, that's the blue dot. Ken always referred to that as the blue dot in the middle, right? That's the part which decides. And what we really want to do is get back to the decision point, to realize that you can make a decision, that you can decide. You do not have to wallow around in the dark spot of the ego. When you see that you're really an ego, just realize you do not have to stay there. If you're in fear, you're in anxiety, it's a choice. You have chosen to be there. And even if there's things that are going on, know that there's a way out of this, and the Holy Spirit will help you out if you just let Him take the lead. Right? And then, of course, there's a third you. There's only one you, of course, which is the last one. That's the you that is the self, the Christ, the you that is oneness.
John, go back to this. There's one other thing that Kenneth Wapnick closes with his description of his chart. And he asks the crowd, he goes, one guy stands up and says, how do I know I'm making advancements in my curriculum with course studies? How will I know? And he said, well, there's many ways. If you're becoming more peaceful, the people around you are becoming more peaceful, if there's less conflict in your life, less illness in your life. But he said, there is one way for certain that you are making huge advancements in your course studies. And it's saying whenever you're reading the course or whenever you're hearing instruction, the Holy Spirit that is speaking to you or speaking to you in the course language is not speaking to you as a body.
Right.
It's speaking to you as this
Sure.
last you that is your mind that is created, that is one with God. So every you that is in the course is not talking to you as you think you are. It's talking to you as something that you've forgotten, which is the mind that God created. So try reading the Course that way. It reads completely different. You'll start to see, wow, I've missed this the whole time.
Right.
Like 3 years ago, I keyed onto it, and I'm like, I've been reading the Course wrong the whole time. No wonder it's been confusing to me. It'll start to be less confusing when you start reading the Course knowing that Jesus is speaking to you as God created you to be, not the false identity as a body that you believe you are.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Okay. So the only true, this is from, by the way, from workbook lesson 8. So you would, if you did just a few days ago, if you were started doing the lessons this year, the one holy true thought one can hold about the past is that it's not here. To think about it all is therefore to think about illusion, fantasy. Very few have realized what is actually entailed in picturing the past or in anticipation of the future. In either case, we're fantasizing. We're back in the memories. The line of the Course was even your memory of your childhood is nothing like what really happened. And it's not like what really happened because we're coloring that, and we're coloring that with it was terrible, or we're coloring it with it was wonderful. I mean, we put onto it our own evaluations and our own interpretations that we're throwing back. So that's not what really even happened. In that fact is, in a long-term sense, it never even happened, but it sure seems like it did, so we won't go into that. But then, of course, the future is total fantasy, because that's that's just a dream that we're having. And sometimes dreams kind of come true, and sometimes they don't come true, and sometimes they kind of come true, but not like we thought that they would. In fact, it's very often it's not like what we thought that they would. All right, Lynn?
I find now, better, okay. I find, doesn't the Course say somewhere about only taking the love with you?
Right.
Yeah, I've been blessed to look at the love I had in the past, and that was my past. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Right. Okay, let's go on. So this is still from lesson 8. My mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. You experience that? And what we tend to do is we tend to go back and we tend to look at, boy, I screwed up there. Boy, I got that one wrong. I really made the wrong choice. If only, you ever do this? If only. If only I'd made a series of different choices in the past, I'd have a different present. That's true. But you didn't make a series of different choices in the past. Probably one of the biggest was, if only I'd saved money. Right? If only I'd married somebody else. If only I'd gotten married when I had a chance. Well, if only I'd sold my house if only I hadn't sold my house. But all that if only stuff that we do that now brings guilt into the present. So let's let the past go where it belongs, which is in the past, and just leave it there. And again, this is like Chardin saying, no one really sees anything. Right. in the moment, because it's all shadowed from the past. We're going to get to the shadow during the second part of today, by the way. The mind's preoccupation with the past is the cause of its misconceptions about time from which your seeing suffers. Your mind cannot grasp the present, which is the only time there is. If you could really grasp, if you have an experience of awakening, then that moment in and of itself, real awakening becomes so vivacious so real, so exciting, so blissful that there is no time for a past or no time for a future. I accidentally stumbled onto this thing last night. I was very briefly looking at YouTube before going off to bed, and they showed a place. There was a woman that this doctor had figured out a way to bring people out of comas. It doesn't last, unfortunately, but by giving some medicine, he brought this woman out of a coma, and 7 minutes. Well, it was 7 minutes. I don't know how long it was, but it was 7 minutes on the film. And she's very slowly does it. They grind up some tablets and give it to her in a spoon in her mouth. And you watch her, and then everything is new. Everything is so vivacious. Everything is so real. It's just like this phenomenal, and she's got her loved ones around there. The fact is, it's her daughter who gives her the medicine to help to bring her back into the moment. They're working on this as something that they can do on a permanent basis so people don't have to go back, that they can keep them. I don't know much more about that than that. But if you're, use the mic, please.
I want to talk a second about something that happened to me. Am I on?
You are now.
Okay, about 6 months ago, I had a second minor heart attack. And after I was in the hospital for like a day. They gave me a blood thinner. And after that, I went to see my heart doctor. And he said, well, what I want to do for you is a catheterization. So he did that. And after the procedure was done, I wanted to talk to the doctor. And he spoke to me, but I was still under the influence of something. So I really didn't exactly get what he was saying. So I hung around and I waited. But he was so busy that an intern came out. And they showed me a picture, a diagram of my heart. And when I seen it, it was like all the arteries, 50%, 50%, 70%. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, wow, like I can have a heart attack at any time. And ever since that point, I went immediately into presence. And it's so funny because when the times when I'm up against the wall like that, it seems to be the most spiritual times for me. I mean, so for like, until my next doctor appointment, I was in presence. Like I couldn't make anything out. Ego did not exist, and I was totally in the moment. And when I went to the doctor, I said to him, so it's bad, huh? And he was like, no. And then, then I came out of present. I was like, you're not dying, okay. Back into, normal. But it was like, it was just so nice to know that I could do that. Like I could be there. It was a wonderful experience. It was so spiritual because ego was nowhere around.
Right.
I was totally in the present moment with no fear or nothing, just in the present moment.
So isn't it nice to know that you hold on to it? Isn't it nice to know that that's there?
Yes.
And that presence is present for all of us at any time if we can awaken to that, if we can just see that, and you can see it. Sometimes in meditation, with psychedelic drugs. I mean, there's a variety of ways, but the Course is trying to get there in a perfectly natural way of just seeing it. But what we're doing here, what we're doing in the Course, is we're cleaning house. That's what the Atonement's all about. It's about cleaning house so we can get to that moment so that it's a consistent moment. I'm not in the past, and I'm not projecting the future, either one. Okay. Let's go on for just a few more minutes, and we'll take our break. Let me just read that last line again. So your mind cannot grasp the present, which is the only time there is. It therefore cannot understand time and cannot, in fact, understand anything. Part of the problem is that it's not a part, that there is no time. The Course is very, very clear about it. It's because the ego is caught in time. The ego is caught in the past and the future. So we're either rehearsing the past in the mind or we're projecting the future, which keeps us from being here unless something happens, like a near-death experience or thinking that you're having a near-death experience will bring you very much into the present, because that's all you're seeing, right, at that moment. So there's only one special relationship we have. We have seen that all there is mind. Everybody's agreed on that. The body is bound by time, will pass. All of these bodies are out, brief candles, and before long I mean, what was that? Something I was reading about 1999, and here we are in 2019, and that was yesterday. That was 20 years ago. So 20 years from now, well, some of us aren't going to be here in these bodies anymore, and be glad. Shanti's still hanging on at almost 92 over here. But, oh, this is some secret. And you want to go home, right, hon? Right. So you're ready to go home. You go to jail for that, Brad. That's not your decision. So let's go back. So there are only two possible relationships. We join with the ego or we join with the Holy Spirit. That's the same as the chart we had a moment ago. The only special relationship is when the wrong mind decision maker joins with the ego. The special relationship comes in keeping the ego alive. The body being remembered is not what makes us eternal. Sometimes we get on to that. I once watched a show about a Norwegian king, and all he wanted was to be remembered. And you think about what the Egyptian pharaohs did. They spent their whole lives, their entire lives, building monuments to their memories. And then the next guy came along and erased it. Scratched the name off. Put their name in his place. Like they're going to be the one that's remembered instead. And they just egos keep doing that. They keep erasing the past and writing in the, that's not the way you're eternal. It has nothing to do with existing in memories, and besides that, who remembers anything? By that I mean, who knows anything? Who knows who Abraham Lincoln was? We have ideas about that, but it's just ideas. Let's go on. So, projection makes perception. Now, this is not the usual quote that I use. The one I usually use is from chapter 21. Projection makes perception. The world you see is what you make it, nothing more. This is from chapter 13. So that phrase appears, the sentence appears twice. Just notice the yous here. And you cannot see beyond it, beyond the projection. Again and again have you attacked your brother because you saw in him a shadow figure in your private world. During the second half of the day, we're going to talk about the shadow stuff. Right? We see it in the, therefore we can talk about it. We talk about the problem that exists in somebody else, like a politician, or somebody else that's out there. But that keeps us from looking within. And thus it is you must attack yourself first, for what you attack is not in others. Why isn't it in others? There's no one there. Pardon? Go to your perception. The only thing that's there is love, really. Therefore, the only thing that we can really, if you're seeing with the mind of Christ, the only thing you see is love. Remember again the definition of Jesus? Jesus is a man who sees the face of Christ in all of his brothers and sisters. That's all that's there is Christ. And if all we can see in the other is the Christ, this happens when we fall in love. You know, one of the nice things about falling in love is you see the perfection. You see the innocence. You see the wholeness. That's what you see. And that's why you fall in love. Right? I know that's true with my wife, and I was with my high school sweetheart. It was the same. They were just pure and innocent and incapable of doing any wrong. Of course, I was wrong, but no, I didn't mean that, honey. I'm not talking about Dolores. I'm talking about something that happened many, many years ago. Well, you got to have a mic.
This is a great way, like
To pick a page in the course and go through and underline all of the yous
Oh, yeah.
are yours, and stop every time you come to one.
Right.
Because how many of you, being honest with me, how many of you read this and thought all of these yous was talking about you? Rather than you as God created you. God, the mind that God created is doing all of this. The body's doing nothing. All of these are pointing to mind, not body.
Right. Let me finish this, and we'll do maybe one more slide, and we'll take our break. So, and thus it is you must attack yourself first, for what you attack is not in others. Its only reality is in your mind. And by attacking others, you are literally attacking what's not there. Because you're attacking a projection. You're attacking something that you've made up. Oh, actually, this is the part where we start going into talking about shadows. So I think this would be a good place for us to take our 15-minute break.